Hey guys, Will here. So today I've got a very exciting looking set of pedals in front of me. These are the SRP-GT pedals from a brand new company called Simracing Pro, which come out of Spain, and they've come out of the gates with three brand new products. The 3-pedal set that we're looking at today, as well as a 2-pedal set which consists of just a throttle and a brake, and also an F1 set as well. Same deal, throttle and a brake without a clutch, but as a more of an F1 style kind of design on that one. So these are quite expensive, 822.31 euros for the 3-pedal set that we have here. We've got 619.84 for the throttle and brake setup, and 619.84 again for the F1 setup. But they do look to be extremely well engineered. There's some very unique design features on this, which we'll be going through today as well, around how they actually measure the input signals and translate those across to the sim. And yeah, just overall, out of the box, a very interesting looking design. So we'll unpack it all today, have a detailed look, and let you know whether this is a product that we would recommend for your sim. So right from the moment you open up the box, it's just a really high-end professional experience, even just down to little things like the foam packaging here actually has numbers and steps on it, so you can see exactly how to take it out of the box properly, which, you know, it's over the top, but it just, you know, it makes you feel like you know what you're doing, makes you feel confident in the entire process. You grab them out of the box and yeah, everything just feels really nice and high end. And that extends across into the instruction manual as well, which I've got to say is probably the most detailed instruction set I've ever had on any set of any sort of sim racing gear. It'd be nice to see this kind of stuff on some of the cockpits that we've reviewed in the past. So yeah, going through this, a nice little fold up, and just the amount of detail that this goes into is, I guess one word for it would be excessive, but you know, everything that you're going to want is there, right down to things like how to appropriately package and, you know, maintain all those sorts of things. Measurements, we've got measurements in there, a little bit of detail about the electronics box, which we'll look at in more detail in just a moment. That's got a bunch of LEDs on it to tell you various different things about performance of the system. Adjustment, software calibration, and then if we go across a couple of CAD drawings there, and this was the one that really impressed me. There's actually a certificate of, what do they call it? A declaration of conformity there with a personalized serial number, or a unique serial number, I should say, which matches the sticker on the back of the pedals there too. So just a really, really high quality experience right from the get-go, and it kind of lets you know straight away they've put a lot of thought and effort into this. It's not something that's just kind of been slapped together and then sold. It's something that they've obviously taken a lot of pride in, which impresses me straight away before I've even gone for a drive with these pedals. So there are a couple of interesting things about these pedals. Let's just spin them around here quickly on camera so you can see in a bit more detail. So we've got, and this is the thing that probably surprised me the most out of the box, we've got what we call pneumatic cylinders on all of these. Now, a pneumatic system works in a very similar fashion to a hydraulic system, but it's working with gas rather than a fluid. So these 3 cylinders here have gas inside them, and then as you push the pedal down, the gas moves through a valving system, which creates the pressure pushing back against you, and then the pressure is measured by a little pressure sensor sitting on the top of each of these. And one thing I do want to point out here, if we have a closer look there, flip it up on its side, all 3 of those are branded SRP as well. So I believe that they have been manufactured either in-house or to a very specific specification provided by SRP themselves. And same deal with the pressure sensors there on the back as well. You can see SRP branded. And these look exactly the same as pressure sensors that I've installed on my real life cars in the past. I remember installing DEFI gauges on my BRZ that had exactly the same style pressure sensors. So definitely automotive grade there. And you can see even down to the connectors on the back. If we pop one of those off for you quickly now. Very nice, high quality there. You can even see it's got a waterproof seal on it too, so it's never going to have any problems with fluid. Not that that's going to be an issue on a sim pedal, I wouldn't imagine, but you know, it is what it is, and it's nice to see that kind of quality. And yeah, I don't see any issues at all, even just down to the way they've put little coils in these to tidy it all up. Just a very, very well engineered kit overall. But let's talk a little bit more about these pneumatic cylinders on the back here, because this is something that actually did surprise me a little bit when I saw that they were using pressure sensors on the throttle and the clutch. Now, obviously we're used to seeing pressure-based systems on our brake pedal, and most people would agree that that is the best way to go about interpreting brake pressure, because braking is a pressure-sensitive thing rather than a positional thing. So you want to, be measuring how much pressure you're actually putting on the pedal rather than the position of the pedal itself. But when it comes to a throttle and a clutch, all we really care about is the position of those pedals. We don't really care so much about pressure. So typically what you would find on a more entry-level set of pedals would be a basic potentiometer, which is basically a variable resistor. It varies the voltage output depending on position. So it'll either rotate around with a little cog system or be a linear potentiometer like we saw on the Racework S1 pedals recently. And I think that oftentimes potentiometers are kind of considered to be an entry-level thing simply because they are cheaper to manufacture at a low quality, and that's generally what we would find on cheap pedals. But there's nothing fundamentally wrong with a potentiometer as long as it is a well-designed system. So as long as you are using a high-quality potentiometer, it's not generally a problem. As long as dust and dirt and debris and moisture can't get inside, you're not going to have those problems with the degradation of performance over time or variances in the feel over time. Often with cheaper pedals, over time they start to take on dirt and they start to feel a little bit crunchy to push on, a little bit more resistance. Things like that generally aren't a problem with high quality potentiometers anyway. But then we move up into Hall effect sensors, which essentially work the same way in terms of the signal that they're outputting. It's basically just varying a voltage. But rather than using moving parts, they measure the deflection of electrons across a little metal plate, and that's then amplified into a voltage which will vary depending on how far you're pushing down your pedal. So essentially, as far as the Sim's concerned, exactly the same kind of input. I've also seen load cells used on throttles and clutches as well. My HE Ultimate pedals do that. And again, that's more of a pressure-based system rather than a positional-based system, but that does seem to work quite well as well. But the reason why I was a little bit surprised to see pressure sensors on the throttle and clutch here is that pressure sensors do have a characteristic of measuring a spike in pressure as you initially push the pedal. We actually saw this when we did our review of the Racework S1 pedals recently when we were looking at the brake calibration. We see a bit of a spike as you initially push the pedal down because the amount of force that's required to get the pedal moving initially is more than the force required to hold it in a position. So it's going to be interesting to see whether we do see any strange characteristics with these pedals, particularly around the throttle. I can imagine potentially when we first push down the pedal, we might get a bit of a spike and then see the pressure kind of drop down a little bit. Now, there are ways to counteract that in the software, obviously, and I'm sure that it isn't going to be an issue, because if it was going to be an issue, I'm sure they wouldn't have implemented this kind of a system to begin with. But it is one thing that I'm going to be definitely keeping a close eye on throughout the review process with these pedals. It's an interesting design choice and something that I thought was worth sort of, highlighting and explaining a little bit more detail to you guys. But look, in terms of the construction and the implementation, I see absolutely no problems at all. It's really great to see that they're using their own branded parts throughout the entire construction. There's no sort of aftermarket parts that have been used, so everything is their own spec, and they've got complete control in terms of electrical and manufacturing tolerances too. So we should see a really sturdy, really reliable set of pedals here with very few problems, I would hope, moving forward. So let's take a more detailed look now at the overall construction and adjustability of the pedals, and then we can move on into the driving experience. Now, in terms of adjustment, most things are uniform across all three pedals. There's a couple of things that are a bit different about the clutch, and the little collar here has a different function depending on whether you're talking about the brake or the throttle. So if we have a look there, you can see fundamentally though the design in terms of how we adjust things is pretty uniform across the three. So let's just quickly talk about the preload spring on the brake first and how that little collar there relates on the throttle and the brake. So on the back here, if we wind out this little plastic collar here, that's actually connected to a nut internally. So we wind that out, and that's effectively placing more preload on the brake spring. And again, this is going to be purely subjective exactly where you want to set that, but there's quite a range of adjustment there. And we'll talk about that a lot more once we go for a drive later on. But that's wound out, much more stiff than it was before. We wind it in again. And much softer than it was before. And it's hard to tell with your hands, obviously, but again, when we go for a drive, we'll talk about it. We also have some adjustment up and down here as well. So if we loosen off this bolt and slide it down, the lower the position, the softer the pedal feel. If we move it up, it gets harder. So at the moment it's set to its hardest setting. And the same deal here with the throttle as well. We can move that up and down to adjust how stiff the throttle feels. And I've got to say, that throttle really does have a really nice feel to it. So you can see we've got the same thread design on the front of our throttle cylinder here, but this actually performs a different function on the throttle. So if we grab a little Allen key here that was included in the kit, and we loosen that off quickly, you can see now that's loose and spins around freely. That's actually got a really nice, even just the way that spins on the thread feels expensive. I'm loving these pedals so far. I really, like looking at pictures of them, I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it, but I'm really impressed so far. So we can wind that out, and that's effectively a bump stop. So this actually gives us a good picture of how far exactly we can wind out on the other thread as well for our spring preload. So we don't want to go too far. We don't want to wind it all the way up, but you can see there, if I have it set there, then the throttle only has a small amount of movement before it hits the bump stop. And there is a nice little rubber grommet there as well. So again, we're not getting that metal to metal contact, which I will say, even on some of the really, really expensive pedals, and I'm talking pedals that cost 3 or 4 times as much as these do, metal to metal contact can be a bit of an issue, because often they're using parts that are taken directly from race cars where, you know, nobody's really caring about those kinds of things. But in a sim environment, you know, people do care about excessive noise. I mean, for myself, I often get people complaining about how loud my shifters are in my videos and things like that. So I think, you know, when we're looking at this in the context of simulation, I feel like so far at least this is a really good balance between, you know, high quality parts and high quality componentry like you would find in a real life race car, but with a simulation kind of, I guess, spin on it, or a simulation in the back of their mind when they're designing this. It kind of covers all of those little things as well. So really impressed by those little things. So that's our bump stop adjustment there. We'll wind that back and lock it off again. I personally like to have quite a lot of travel in my throttle pedal. I feel like it's just easier for modulation, but again, it's purely a personal preference thing. We'll set it back to where it was from factory for now. Lock it off again. So it doesn't need to be super tight, just enough that it grabs in and it's not going to move on its own. So again, it's nice that we've got those little grub screws there to lock things in position. That's one problem that I have actually had with my HE Ultimates that I'll mention is a couple of times my clutch has worked its way loose over time. Even with a second nut on there to sort of bind the threads together, it does work its way loose. So I'm hoping that, and again, we can comment on this once we've been driving for a while, but I don't anticipate we'd have any problems with that sort of locking mechanism there. So very clever design there too. And then if we look at the front of the pedals here, we've got a few more adjustments too that we need to cover. So we can adjust the position of the pedal faces themselves through 9 different positions. We'll look at that in a moment. But we can also adjust the tilt angle of the pedals too, to adjust between a GT or a formula style seating position. So if I take the Allen key and 10mm spanner that were also included in the kit, don't need to release it entirely, just loose enough that we can get some movement in there. I'll do the other one as well. There we go. So now you can see quite a lot of adjustment there. We can tilt it up and down. You can see there's a bit of a sort of bow shape. It kind of slopes off at the back there. So we can adjust up and down, forward and back. Really quite clever. So you can imagine if you're in a GT style seating position with your pedal plate mounted quite flat to the ground, then you probably want to have them a little bit more sloped or a little bit more reclined. If you're doing a formula style seating position, then you want to have them more upright so they're kind of facing towards you with your feet up higher. So again, like it just feels like they kind of thought of everything. And I'd imagine they've been through a lot of different design revisions and a lot of trials and prototypes to get to this point. It feels like it's something that's been through a lot of revisions rather than something that's sort of being sold to customers and then refined later on in the process, which I'm quite happy about. So we've got the same amount of adjustability on the throttle and the clutch. The brake has a little bit more on top of that as well. And that allows us to have a little bit of an offset between the face of our brake and our throttle. That's important for heel and toe driving in particular. What you want to do generally with heel and toe is have your brake a little bit in front of your throttle so that when your brake is depressed, it's sitting quite flush with your throttle pedal, and that allows you to roll your heel across and dab on the throttle without kind of getting muddled up there. So again, adjustability is really important, and adjustability is something that we have an abundance of here. So I really can't see any scenario where you're not going to be able to adjust this into a right position. And it's nice that you've got that adjustability on the pedal face itself rather than having to sort of unbolt the entire pedal from the assembly and move it forward. That's something that's annoyed me a few times with some pedals that I've had on my rig is, you want to quickly change your pedal position for a different style of driving. You've got to pull the entire thing off the rig, move it all forward, and sometimes you're kind of poking around in a tight space. This is much, much, much easier to work with. Pedal face adjustment, we've got 9 different positions that we can use here. So you can see 2 bolt holes in the front of the face, and then we can go from right to left and up and down in 9 different positions, depending on how big your feet are or how you want to offset the pedal. So again, we'll talk about this more when we go for a drive later on, but I don't see any reason why there'd be any problems. Now that is important because obviously we are fixed in terms of where we can put the pedals from side to side here. You can move them across one space, but I think that's going to probably place them too close together for most people. That's probably more so that they can use this same base plate for other pedals rather than because they expect you to actually move this. I would imagine if you move the brake across to that position, it's probably going to be far too close to the throttle. But again, we can find out when we go for a drive later on, but we'll get those mounted back up in their default positions for now. So on to some of the unique features of the clutch now. So you'll remember when we looked at the throttle, we saw we had this little adjustment collar here, which we could use to adjust the amount of throw that was available. Now we don't have the accessibility in here to use the same method. So what we have here is quite a clever design. You can actually see this part of the pedal here is sloped, this upright. So we can actually take that off and rotate it around 180 degrees, and that actually adjusts the angle of this whole assembly and shortens the throw of the clutch pedal. Now I like quite a long stroke in my clutch pedal, so I don't really see that being something that I'll need to adjust. But if you do want to have a shorter throw, you can spin that around as well. Generally what I recommend to people with a clutch pedal is calibrate it a little bit shorter than the actual maximum deflection, so you only have to actually physically push it about 70% usually is the number I use to get 100% in the game. It's a bit of a hack, but yeah, I find generally if you're sort of slamming away at it, you're wanting to change gear quickly, cars like a Skip Barber for example, that's quite useful because you can kind of just quickly blip the clutch and that's enough to get into the next gear. So that is basically how that works. Now what we want to do now is pop this housing off and show you how things work inside the clutch here, because this is actually quite interesting. So we've done a little bit of disassembly here just to show you how this clutch works in more detail. We've removed the ball joint and push rod from the paddle assembly here. And now what we're going to do is remove this little cover. So we'll undo the ball joint here. And again, this is all really high quality stuff. The more we dig into this, the more I'm really just sort of appreciating how high quality, no expense spared all of this stuff is, even just down to the quality of that shank bolt that they've used through there. So we're not going to get any wear and tear over time. No lubrication on it, but I'm guessing that it really doesn't need to be. So that's all good. Slots through there. So let's just loosen this off now. I have loosened this off camera just before, so I wasn't struggling with a wrench to try and do it on video. We'll remove that. Now we should be able to just, hopefully we don't get an explosion of parts everywhere when we do this. It's kind of like pulling apart a watch. It's always a little bit scary, but pop that off. Okay, I think we're good. All right, so what we have here is a little magnet, and then if we have a look in the opposing side here, we've got our locating pin, which runs through the top, and that goes through a little nylon or plastic insert in the top of the metal here. And then underneath that, there's a little magnet there. I'll hold that up to the camera for you guys. And you can see on the front of it, there's a little foam pad. And what that does is it stops, again, any sort of metal to metal contact sound. So it grabs on nicely, but you don't get that horrible clacking sound when you're driving, which is a nice little touch. So essentially what happens is when you push the pedal in, right at the very end of the pedal, you get this kind of slight grabbing feel in the pedal. It's noticeable with your hands, probably not so noticeable with your feet, but again, we'll comment on that once we drive later on. But it's nice to see these little details put in there, sort of try to give you that, I guess, simulation of the feeling of the pressure plate releasing on a clutch when you actually reach the bite point. So in the absence of the actual feeling of a clutch plate being manipulated against a flywheel in a real car, that's kind of a next best thing, so to speak. But interestingly, there's no spring internally inside this itself. I thought we might actually see a spring inside here, but we can see all the spring force is just provided by the, I'll just rotate that around a little bit more for you guys so you can see. All that spring force is just, and I don't know whether there's a spring internally in this cylinder or not. It feels like there is, but it could just be purely down to the compression of the gas inside the chamber pushing back on us. It does feel really smooth, so I'm guessing that's probably what it is. So anyway, that's how that all works. Very simple design, really, when you look at it. It looks quite complex on the outside, but again, it's nice that they've put this amount of detail and thought into all these little designs and added these little touches that just give it a little bit extra. So a quick little look at the electronics control module here. Barry opened this up and showed the PCB inside in his review video, so no need for me to do the same thing, but we'll quickly plug it in here. It is a proprietary board that they've designed themselves. So we'll plug it into the PC, and you can see along the front we get a nice little sequence, power on, self-test or posting, so to speak. Then we've got a brake regulator light, a clutch light, a brake light, a throttle light, and initialization okay, which is basically telling us that the power on self-test has passed. That's a green light showing that it's okay there. Then we've got a warning light should there be any problems, and a little power LED as well. So something nice from a diagnostics point of view, so you can see if there's any issues with any of the systems on the pedals. And one thing that I do really like is if we unplug this again quickly now, we have a USB-C connection. So that is starting to become the universal standard now, as it should be. Much easier to plug in because it doesn't have that problem of having to turn it around 3 times to get it going the right way, as you do with a USB micro or mini. So yeah, I would like to see this on more sim racing products moving forward. Okay, so once we've got the pedals all installed on the rig, the first thing we need to do is go in and do a firmware update on the pedals before we can go in and do our calibration. So I wanted to include this in the video simply because the process is a little bit clunky for doing this. It uses a program called Xloader, which I have used quite a bit before, and I just had a couple of little recommendations on top of what they say in their instructions that I wanted to share with you guys. So what I've done here is actually connect the pedals to a separate laptop that doesn't have any other devices connected to it, simply because Xloader is capable of flashing firmware or blasting firmware to a range of different devices, and there is a possibility if you accidentally select the wrong COM port, you could end up completely bricking another piece of your valuable sim racing gear. So we don't want that to happen. So to remove the opportunity for that to happen at all, we've connected the pedals to a completely separate computer. So what we want to do is we want to open up Control Panel, go into Devices and Printers, and we can see here we've got SRP-GT, GT1 and F1. So we're going to click on that and click on the Hardware tab. And we can see here Universal Serial Bus Serial Device COM3. So that means that it is connected via COM3 as far as the system's concerned. That should be the only COM port that we see in the software. We just want to confirm that first. And then inside the SRP My Setup version, whatever version you have, or whatever version is the latest version, folder that you'll download from the SRP website, you'll see a little folder called Xloader. So we're going to double click on that, double click on the x86 folder, assuming that you're on a Windows-based PC. There is a 64-bit version there as well, but the 32-bit seems to work just fine. I'm going to right click on this guy and open as administrator, just so I avoid any issues with trying to output data via a serial port. Sometimes it doesn't like doing it without administrator rights. And then once we've opened up Xloader, you'll see Device SRP-GT Pedals. You'll see a field for hex file, which is where we're going to select the hex file from the root directory from the SRP download. So Simracing Pro version whatever.hex. We're going to click open on that. And then we want to make sure our COM port here is selected as COM port 3 to match what we saw in Device Manager earlier. So we're going to click on upload, and we're expecting to see this fail the first time we do it. So we'll click on upload, upload failed. And then we should see when we drop down the menu here, an additional COM port become available. So COM 4, we're going to click on upload again. And again, it's saying upload failed, which is a little strange. We'll give it another try. Upload again, can't open COM port. Maybe we did that a little bit too quickly. It might be that it's still just detecting the device there. It should show up as an Arduino board, I think. So we'll click again. Can't open COM port. We'll try COM 3 again. Upload failed. Okay. This is what I was talking about when I said it can be a little bit clunky. So we'll try COM 4 again. There we go. Now it's saying uploading. So fingers crossed we haven't bricked anything here. Yeah, there we go. So 18714 bytes uploaded. That amount can vary depending on the firmware package that you're flashing. But once we see that, that means that it has theoretically at least successfully flashed. There doesn't appear to be any sort of verification process or anything here, which is again why I'm being overly cautious and using a separate machine. So we're going to close that off now. And if we go back into Control Panel and Device and Printers again, Devices and Printers, we should see, there we go, SRP GT pedals again. We're going to click on Properties, go back to Hardware, and we can see they are showing up as connected. So theoretically, everything should be fine. Now we can go back in, connect these to our main sim PC or whatever PC you're using with all the rest of your gear, and get started on the calibration process. Okay, so over on the sim PC now, we've got the SRP My Setup version 1.2D running here, which looks a little bit different to what you might have seen in some other review videos. They've gotten rid of one of the extra buttons down here and replaced it with just the single basic settings button. So we can choose between a few different languages here as well. We also have a link to the instruction manual too if you need that, both a YouTube version and a PDF document. So we're going to click on the Pro basic settings here. Now, if it's the first time you've loaded up, it'll take you straight to the calibration screen. I'll quickly run you through that. I just quickly tested to make sure everything was working before I started shooting the video. So simple, you know, this is pretty much what you would expect from any pedal set these days. Press the accelerator to the maximum, hold it and press next. So we've got our foot pushed all the way to the bottom. Now, if you do want to be a little bit tricky here and under-calibrate a little bit so you don't have to push the throttle all the way to the end to get to maximum in the game, you can do that, but there's also a high and low point dead zone adjustment a little bit later on as well. So I'm just going to push it to the maximum for now. Go next. Push the brake to where you would like your maximum amount of brake to be, hold it and press next. So I'm going to push it to about where I feel like the absolute maximum would want to be. So a little bit past the threshold. Now these pedals, just as an initial impression, do have quite a nice sort of friction point there where it's kind of, I guess the best way to describe it is a good sort of threshold for comfortable threshold braking. So I can kind of press down on it. I feel a point where it kind of naturally wants to rest. And that would probably be about my 80% braking point, and then I can push a little bit harder past that to get to 100%. So that's where I'm going to push it to for the calibration. Click next again, and then we're going to do our clutch. And again, I can under-calibrate this later on with the dead zone, so I'm just going to push it to maximum for now. Hit next. Calibrated pedals, check the calibration. Now you can save or calibrate again. So we're going to hit save, and this takes us through to our fine-tuning adjustment screen. So we can push on the 3 pedals and we see they go up and down in the software exactly as you would expect. So this is where I was talking about top dead zone and bottom dead zone. So with our lower dead zone set to 004 there, you can see I can push on the pedal a little bit before I get any reading. And I've just got it loaded up here in iRacing as well, so you can see in the game as far as the inputs are concerned exactly what's happening. So I have to push on the pedal a little bit before we start to see a reading in the game as well. Now you'll notice in iRacing I've got a bit of a flash happening on my throttle pedal, so I'm going to add a little bit of a dead zone there as well. And you can see just even adding 1 or 2 is enough to take care of that. But I also have a little bit of a habit of resting my foot on the throttle, so I'm going to add a little bit more of a dead zone in there. So I have to push it just a little bit more intentionally to start to get a reading there. And then brake, we'll check that as well. The brake's nice and stiff. It doesn't have any play in it or any slop in it whatsoever, so I can rest my foot on that comfortably without getting any reading. So I think I actually will leave that as 0 dead zone. It's actually quite impressive. There's no slop in that pedal whatsoever. I think it's worth noting that. So that's our lower dead zones taken care of. Now we can look at our top dead zone. So remember before I was saying you can under-calibrate, so to speak, so that you don't have to push it all the way to the top to get a maximum reading. And that's something that I do actually like to do for my clutch in particular. I only really want to push that to about 75% deflection to get 100% in the game. Just makes miss shifts a little less common. So what I'll do is I'll push it to 100% now. You can see I'm getting 100% reading on my gauge in SRP as well as 100% in iRacing. If I crank that down, and now you can see I'm not pushing my foot all the way to the bottom, but I am getting 100% inside the game. We can actually probably even go a little bit lower than that still. So there we go, 100%, and then I have a bit more that I can push on the pedal before it goes all the way to the ground. So that seems like a pretty good calibration to me. And then again, for our braking, we have an adjustment for what it's calling our maximum brake pressure. So again, same principle. You can see I push the brake to 100%, I get 100% in the game, but I can actually reduce that should I wish to do so. So I don't have to push the pedal so hard physically to get the same 100% reading. So at that point there, I'm pushing to where my threshold braking point would be. So about 80% for this car that we're driving at the moment, being the Porsche Cup car, because you get to about 80% brake pressure before you start to brake up, before you start to lock up the wheels. So yeah, I probably want to go a little bit higher than that for me. Yeah, that's about right there for me. So I'm getting about 80% brake pressure when I'm pushing up to that first kind of threshold point on the pedal. Now, one cool thing that we do have here is the ability to set a hotkey to actually adjust our maximum brake pressure on the fly as well. That is pretty handy. Now, at the moment it's set to F1 and F2. If we click on each one of these, we get a little drop-down menu that allows a few different choices here. I haven't been able to figure out exactly what this May plus Z, May plus X, and May plus C mean. I did try to actually map it to buttons on my wheel, and that doesn't appear to work, but maybe that's something that I can clarify for you guys and let you know in the comments later on, or maybe that's something that they'll be able to add later on, because it would be cool to be able to actually adjust that from your wheel on the fly. But I do like the ability to at least change it on the fly, even if it is through a button box or a keyboard. So that's pretty cool. And then again, our top dead zone for our throttle works exactly the same way as it does on the clutch. So if you don't want to push all the way to the top to get to 100% throttle, you wind that back, and now getting 100% there before I've actually pushed it all the way to the bump stop. And again, just commenting on the feel of the bump stops, it's nice that we don't have that kind of metal to metal contact when we do push all the way through the maximum threshold. Everything's nice and quiet, and that is definitely, I think these have to be probably the quietest pedals I think I've ever used. Maybe the Pneumatic V3s come close, but that is the basic calibration. Once we're happy with it, we can click apply settings. It does seem to sort of apply on the fly anyway, so I'm not sure exactly why we have an apply button, but it is what it is. We're going to hit save, and that brings up a separate dialog box here. We can actually save a separate file for different cars. So that's handy as well. It's not just one configuration file, and you have to go in and change it manually every time. I'm going to name this Porsche Cup, and now hit save. So I can set up different profiles for different cars should I wish to do so. And definitely, I think with the Porsche Cup car in particular, it's something that you're probably going to want to do. So we're all set up, ready to go for a drive now. But one thing that I did mention in the earlier part of this video was just around the usage of a pressure sensor on the throttle. So I just wanted to show you in the graph here exactly what I was talking about with that. Now, if I'm just putting in a nice linear signal up and down, you can see it's quite nice and smooth. It goes up and down. There's no pressure drop or anything funny like that. But if I go suddenly to say 75% on the throttle, so if I go like that, you can see it actually jumps up and then drops down a little bit immediately. So that's, as I was talking about before, that's when you use a pressure-based sensor, what happens is, or air pressure or gas pressure or hydraulic pressure at least, not so much with load cells, but the amount of pressure that's registered initially as you actually push the pedal down is greater than the amount of pressure required to actually hold the pedal in a given position. So what that results in is what we're seeing on the screen there. When we push to 75%, we get that initial spike that almost went up to about 100% there, and then drops back down to our actual desired throttle input. So it'll be interesting to see in a car without traction control like the 911 Cup car, whether that just causes the back end to kind of step out all the time. Because I often do like to sort of apply the throttle quite liberally in the exit of a turn, but sort of have it at the threshold where it shouldn't quite start to spin up the wheels. So we're going to do Barcelona in the 911 Cup car to begin with, because that's what I've been driving the most recently, been doing in my streams as well. And we do have the VRS telemetry data for that as well that we can have a look at later. If there's anything worth kind of comparing later on, we might not need to. It might be pretty straight clean cut, but we'll see. But we'll jump out now. So for reference, I was doing 150.1 flat? 150.1 was my best lap time with the HE Ultimates under exactly the same conditions. So 100 litres of fuel, same weather, same time of day, and same track temperature and everything else as well. So we'll see what we can do here, but the pedals do feel quite different from what I'm used to straight off the bat. I mean, that is purely just down to adjustment and, you know, subjectivity as well. I've got the spring preload on the brake pedal set to its absolute minimum right now, whereas I did have my HE Ultimates quite a bit stiffer. So we can always adjust from here if we feel we need to, but this is all about first impressions at the moment. And one first impression I will say straight away, the throttle pedal feels really, really nice. It's very, very smooth. A little bit progressive as well. You can feel a slight pressure build up as you push down, which feels nice. It kind of feels like a spring pressure increasing as you would with a spring-loaded pedal, but not so much that it feels unrealistic at all. It feels very, very nice, very smooth, very, very fluid, I would say. I'd probably go as far as to say it's the best, if not very close to the best throttle pedal I've used. I know I spoke very highly of Raceworks throttle pedal recently as well. It doesn't have a hydraulic damper on it like this does. HE Ultimate one does, that I've used the most. But no, this does feel really, really nice. So let's see how we go here. 150.1 is my best with the HE Ultimates. The tyres are still going to be a little bit cold for the first lap or so, but Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned briefly before, but I felt on my outlap little bit of locking up in the rear there. Probably just down to the cold tires though. But I'm really liking the really defined threshold where the pedal sort of, you reach a threshold with the pedal, with the brake pedal, and you can modulate around that point. And if you've got it calibrated as we do, so that it's sitting at around about 80–85% brake pressure for the Porsche Cup car. Whoops, loose in the rear again. It really does feel very nice, and I feel quite confident. I know that sounds funny as I'm kind of losing the rear there, but that was mostly just the cold tires, I think. And I'm still sort of getting used to that not quite so heavy pedal. I might end up adjusting the preload a little bit later on, I think, once we've done a bit more driving. But yeah, really enjoying how I can kind of just feel that threshold and work around it. And you'll notice, like, other than the few little lockups that I had just skating around a tiny bit, I haven't had any major, you know, flat spotting style lockups, which often when I change pedals, I really struggle to, you know, drive at all for the first few laps. Whereas this is, I feel like I'm adapting pretty quickly here. And the brake feels really nice as well. Again, very smooth. There's no binding. There's absolutely no slop in the pedal whatsoever, which I really like. It's quiet as well. There's no clacking of pedals at all that I noticed. Obviously, we'll talk about the clutch later on as well. Not really the car to test the clutch out. We'll do something completely different for that later on, but little skatey in the rear there, but was able to modulate it and control it just fine. The 153.2 for the first lap, but we were a little bit all over the place. Pick up the throttle nice and early here. No lockups so far. I mean, when you kind of feel the back end of the car squirming underneath you, that's when you know you're on the limit before locking up completely. A little late on the throttle again there. Get it turned in. Whoa, that was lift off oversteer that time. That had nothing to do with brakes. Yeah, no issues modulating throttle either, and so far I'm not noticing any tendency for the back to want to sort of light up on me either, which again I was a little concerned about with that pressure-based system. It doesn't seem to be an issue so far, at least. As I kind of gradually apply the throttle there, it didn't sort of feel like it was trying to jump on me. And I do have a bit of a habit of jumping on the throttle a little bit sometimes mid-corner, which I know is a bad habit, but it doesn't seem to be causing me any problems, which I thought it might. A little late on the brakes there. That was my own fault. That was a 150.8, so already we're within 0.6 of a second, 0.7 of a second of my all-time PB, which is pretty good for 2 laps with a new set of pedals. Especially a set of pedals that feels so different from what I'm used to, but again, just down to having that really defined threshold for the braking, I'm really enjoying it. And I'd say, look, they're not, at least the way they're adjusted right now, they're not the most realistic feeling pedals, at least in terms of the brake, that I've ever used. They don't, you know, they don't feel anywhere near as realistic in terms of comparison to a race car as the hydraulic pedals that I've been using in a few videos recently, and I've actually got another set that I'm testing out at the moment too, which we'll tell you more about soon. But I feel like I'm feeling all the things I need to, and as far as a set of pedals that's designed for sim racing is concerned, these are really hitting they're really hitting the mark. So I'm going to try and go a little bit quicker next lap. But I feel confident. I feel confident with the brakes already, which is really surprising me. I didn't expect to be able to go anywhere near this fast or be anywhere near this consistent with my braking this early on, which is, I think, one of the hallmarks of a really good set of pedals. When you kind of just, you can adapt to it, you feel comfortable with it, and you feel like you know what you're doing. I'm a little bit more aggressive with my braking now. Braking a touch later and a little bit stronger. Yeah, I really feel like I can modulate around that pressure point really accurately. I was able to give it a little bit more brake. Even just there, I felt I was braking a little too late. I was able to get a little bit heavier on the pedal without it causing the rear to lock up. Yeah, I'm really liking these. I'm liking them more than I thought I would, to be honest. You know, I've been pretty lucky with some really high-end pedal sets recently, testing them out, and you know, I'm testing out a few sets that have cost more than double what these cost, and these, you know, I've got everything I need to go fast here, I feel like, which is great. So that was a 150.7. Little skatey in the rear again there, but I controlled it. Didn't get away from me. Get on the throttle early. Yeah, those mid-corner little tiny adjustments and modulations are really working well for me. This is a quick one, we're 0.4 up almost. A little slow there. No issues with the throttle still. Haven't been lighting up the rears at all, so I don't think that pressure thing is going to be an issue. We'll comment on that more in the conclusions in the video once I've had more hours of driving time. How did we go? 150.6. Okay, so still a little slow. We'll do a few more laps now. I'll maybe do 5 or 6 laps and we can come back in and have a look at my consistency and my times over time. Rather than making you sort of watch me go round and round, we'll do a bit of a summary, and then I think we might put Tom in for a drive as well, because it'll be good to get his perspective across from a different sort of set of pedals. He's been running V3 Fanatec pedals with a damper kit on the brake and the performance kit for probably 5 or 6 months now. So I'm sort of coming from a more expensive set of pedals and he's coming from a cheaper set of pedals. So it'd be good to sort of compare our thoughts there and how we sort of meet in the middle. So do a few more laps, get a few more times, do a bit of a comparison there, and then stick Tom in the car. So that was a 150.165, which is pretty much on par with my all-time PB. And that was on lap 8. And I've got to say, that surprises me a lot. I did not expect to be this quick this soon. and I feel like I can still go faster. All right, so we ended up doing 10 laps. No mistakes really in any of those laps other than just being a little bit slow while I was finding my feet in the first 3 or 4. But yeah, we did 153, 150.8, then a 151. So I was within a second of my all-time PB on lap 2, which really blows my mind, especially considering how different these pedals feel. And then I did 150.7, 150.6, 150.8. And that was the point where I stopped talking, so I was actually focusing on my driving. And then I dropped down to 150.16, which was equal with my all-time PB. And then 149.7, 149.9, and 149.9 again. So not only pretty consistent, but quick as well. So look, I mean, and that's also just with baseline out-of-the-box setup of these pedals. I haven't done any adjustment at all yet. And yeah, like I think that's just down to, again, having that really nice refined feeling in the pedals, knowing exactly what's going on. There's no weird binding or crunchiness, anything like that. Everything's just really nice and smooth and consistent. But also just having that nice big threshold on the brake pedal and sort of being able to modulate around that, but feel exactly where that is every single time I brake. So I'm able to hit maximum braking force without locking up every single time. And I can tell you, other than, again, those first 3 laps, I did not have a single lockup the entire time I was driving them, which again really surprises me. That's very hard to achieve in this car, and particularly when I could feel the back end starting to snake and break away a little bit. Never once actually broke traction completely. So as a first impression, very, very impressed. But let's put Tom in the car now. We'll get him in the same car around Nürburgring, around Nordschleife, and see how he goes. He's got quite a bit of experience in this car around that track, coming from Pneumatic V3 pedals, so other end of the spectrum from what I'm coming from with the really super high-end stuff. And let's see what his impressions are. Then we'll have a look at the clutch pedal as well, because we haven't really looked at that yet, and tie it all together with our overall impressions of the product.
Okay, here we go. I'm quite excited about this now. Yeah, Will's definitely been quite impressed, so I can feel straight away this throttle does feel absolutely incredible, but I feel the brake might be a little loose for me. We might do a bit of adjusting there. Hey, Will?
Yeah?
What can we do to stiffen this up a little bit?
Well, there's a couple of things we can do, but the easiest is to increase the preload.
Okay.
Are you sure you don't want to drive a little bit first just to see, or you reckon that's a little bit too...
No, it's pretty loose for me.
Okay. All right. Let me get down in there then, and we're just going to... Hang on.
So I've got my preferred choice of footwear on today.
Yeah.
The
feet smell.
Yeah, good. The Nike on the left foot and the sock on the right foot.
Right.
That's just what I've been doing at home. All right.
That's about probably 50% of how far it can go. How's that?
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That feels like I've got a bit more definition early on.
Yeah.
And then I've still got that same threshold point that you had before.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I like that.
You want to give that a try?
Yeah, let's give that a go.
All right.
Okay. Just good, but man, they just feel smooth, don't they?
Yeah.
So nice. Okay, here we go. Yeah, straight away, just the smoothness in that throttle it's quite amazing, actually. Just try and get a feel for where my where the threshold is on the brake. Got to be a bit gentle with the cold tires at the moment. See? Let's keep going. All right, I'm just going to warm up the tires on this out lap, and then we'll see what we can do on the next lap, maybe. So I am coming from the Pneumatic V3s with the dampening kit and performance kit on it. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Yep, good.
Dampening kit on the brake, not on the throttle.
The dampening kit on the brake, yes. And I mean, I've got no issues with them, really. I quite enjoy them. I've had them for a few months now. I feel like they've been a great set for really being able to hone in my muscle memory and that kind of thing. They've been excellent. One little frustration I've had with them is the crunchiness I get from the dampening kit. I guess it's the fluid in there, just air bubbles, I presume. Gives it this crunchy feel under heavy brakes. That definitely is not a problem on these. This is the smoothest thing you can imagine. It's just gorgeously smooth. Right down the whole kind of range of of all the pedals, really. I mean, I haven't touched the clutch, but the throttle and the brake, I can guarantee they are feeling absolutely buttery smooth. And there's quite a nice weight in the throttle. I'm noticing that progression a little bit, like Will mentioned. It's super subtle, but especially without a shoe on that foot, I can definitely tell that there is some slight progression coming from the gas chamber, I suppose. All right, so through this section here is where you really kind of have to dance around on your brake a fair bit, just giving it little taps here and there to get your car to turn in and, you know, just upset the balance of the car and that kind of thing. So, I mean, there's a lot at play here in terms of getting a good lap time, but definitely precision on your brake is super important. This is still my out lap, but the confidence is building very quickly. All right, here we go. We'll set up for a hot lap here. See what happens. 7 minutes was the benchmark time we set a little while ago. So, I don't know. We'll see how we go. Whoop, locked up a bit there and gone wide. I think I just got a bit excited. There we go. Actually, something I noticed I was doing a little while ago was really sort of pumping the brake under heavy brakes in a big braking zone. I'd give it an initial squirt of brake and then, whoops, and then I'd kind of modulate it by coming off and on. I think that maybe I'm not doing that as much at the moment, which is probably a good thing. It means, you know, I'm making sort of little changes. I'm probably hitting my point better to start with, but then I'm able to just modulate it naturally without completely lifting off, which should save me a bunch of time. But yeah, there's such a well-defined point of resistance in that brake pedal, so I know that's my point, kind of thing. Okay, this is a tricky bit. Good, didn't lock up, stay out wide there. There we go, that was nice. Pretty smooth, or carried a bit too much speed through that last apex there. Alright, here we come up to the nice, fun, twisty bit again. I'll try and be fairly aggressive through here, which will probably result in a crash, I'm sure, but it'll be a good experiment, I think. I'm just very likely to get too much curb somewhere and then lose it, so see how we go. You can probably see my left foot is just making these little twitchy movements, and I'm finding it it's just it feels so much more natural. I don't know, it's coming more naturally to me what I need. Whoops. Yeah, I was finding just real accuracy in those little dabs of brake until I was a bit too greedy on the throttle and spun there. But yeah, these are really nice. They're very fun, enjoyable pedals to drive with, I think. So yeah, let's see how the clutch goes, Will.
All right, so we've spent about 5 or 6 hours now just driving various different cars, various different sims, and look, there really wasn't anything else to add in terms of the brake and the throttle pedal. The only thing that I ended up changing was just leaving Tom's adjusted preset, or preload I should say, for the brake. Everything else, yeah, I mean, my initial impressions were pretty much bang on, so I don't really feel the need to elaborate too much more on it all. But what we need to talk about now is the clutch pedal. Now, I'm gonna say straight off the bat that I'm not a heel and toe expert by any means. If you want to see somebody really slamming on the pedals, go and check out Barry from Sim Racing Garage's video, because he is much better at that kind of thing than I am. But I'm going to put it through the same test as I did with the Racework pedals recently. Just talk a little bit more about this clutch pedal. So I think the way I would summarize it, and I want to keep this part of the video as short as possible, is kind of unremarkable. It has that little magnet system in it, as we showed in the first part of the video, but when you're actually driving, you don't really notice the magnetic force towards the end of the throw. So it kind of it feels just like pushing any other pedal. Occasionally it bites a little bit at the end of the throw. Now I do know that they are still working on the feel of the pedal, and they've actually sent a couple of emails saying that they're, you know, looking at revising elements of the design, and I'm going to get my hands on whatever they end up doing to fix it up. So I'll let you guys know. I'll keep you updated in the comments on the video, as well as do a follow-up video if it, you know, warrants one. But look, I mean, the clutch does what it does. It does it well. It's nice and smooth. It's kind of similar to the throttle in a sense in that regard. But because the throttle is, you know, the throttle inputs require a little bit more finesse and a little bit more sensitivity, it's kind of important there. Whereas with the clutch, it's something that you kind of just beat on and it does what it does. And as long as it's not binding, as long as it's not, you know, awkward or funny or rocking from side to side or anything like that, which this isn't doing any of those things, then it kind of just does what it does. So yeah, I mean, there's not really a whole lot more to say on the matter. I don't really notice the magnetic force at all. And we'll comment on that when we have the revised design. But I mean, we're just going for a little bit of a drive here, not really beating on it too hard, but just enjoying kind of driving around, and it's just kind of doing its thing. Now, what I will say with regards to heel and toe, and again, I'm not an expert, but the pedals are very comfortable to use in that regard. The interface between the brake and the throttle is very clean, very comfortable. You can roll off from one pedal to the next very easily as well. The spacing's really good. And obviously we do have that 9-way adjustability as well, so that's a bonus if you need it. For me, the default setting works just fine. Tight corner coming up here, so I'm not going to screw this one up. But yeah, I mean, the nice beveled edge on the anodized aluminium faces as well is really comfortable. You can do this with socks on as well, and it doesn't cut up your feet. I've had issues with previous pedals as well, actually cutting a notch in the side of my boots. Hasn't been an issue at all with these. If you can see that little notch on the side of my boot in the camera shot down on the pedals, that's from a previous set of pedals, not this one. But yeah, look, I mean, the more we've dug into these pedals throughout every element of what we've done, the more I've kind of fallen in love with them. I mean, they're a bit of a unique design, and I applaud that they're, you know, not just following the same mold as everybody else, but they do everything that they do very, very well, other than the clutch feeling a little bit kind of unremarkable, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, really, really happy with all the driving tests. So what do you think, Tom?
I really like them.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by, I mean, like when you get them out of the box, as I said at the start of the video, the whole unboxing experience was really positive.
Yeah.
You know, it's well presented, it's well packaged, the instruction manual is clear, and like it tells you straight from the start that they've put a lot of attention.
That's it, yep.
And, you know, a lot of effort into making sure that everything works the way it's intended to work. And that experience has kind of carried through the entire review process. You know, as I said when I was doing the driving test, they may not be the most realistic feeling pedals I've ever used when you compare them to like hydraulic pedals that cost 3 times as much, which genuinely feel exactly the same as a race car. But the thing you have to remember is that, you know, no pedal system is going to feel exactly like a race car, because you don't have that mechanical feedback of the ABS pumping and, you know, feeling the texture of the rotors through the pedal. You know, that we're just not quite there in terms of that technology yet.
Yeah, it's like they've been designed for sim racing and they do a damn good job of it.
Exactly. So I think with the exception of the clutch pedal though, that's
a bit of a fail.
That was a bit of a fail, but they have told us that they're working on that. So we'll wait and see exactly what they come up with regards to the clutch pedal. Hopefully they can do some sort of revision to the existing design so it doesn't end up having to be like an optional accessory that you purchase or something. But I would say absolutely, if you're looking at getting the throttle brake set, so the F1 set or the 2-pedal set, then yeah, I think it's a really good buy at the price it is. Obviously it's going to depend on the import costs to wherever you live, because I don't know that there's an Australian distributor at this point in time. But I mean, that's something that'll get sorted out in the future anyway. But yeah, I mean, like, the only real concern that I had going into it was just the use of these pressure sensors throughout. I thought it
didn't turn out to be a problem at all.
I mean, I didn't notice it. I mean, we did, 6 or 7 hours of driving on these, and yeah, I didn't notice even once that the rear tyres were trying to spin up or anything like that.
No, it never felt like there was out of control throttle when we didn't want it kind of thing. It was,
so I'd say that while, I mean, it may not be the most efficient way of doing it, when you consider just how nice that throttle does feel, I mean, the only other way to achieve it really would be to still have the pneumatic cylinder, but then have like a arm next to it with a potentiometer or a linear potentiometer or a load cell or
then of course you're adding more moving parts.
You're adding more moving parts, you're adding opportunity.
It's going to be a compromise.
Exactly. So this, you know, it's a minimalistic design that just kind of works. So I printed out a couple of other prices. Now we do tend to only try to only talk about products that we've actually tested ourselves. So I'm sure that there's going to be a whole bunch of questions about a whole range of different pedals, particularly the Mecha Cup 1 pedals. I'm sure a lot of people will be wondering about those. So hopefully we can get our hands on them at some point to test as well, because I think they're probably going to be quite close to this from what I've seen. But look, these come in at, for the 3-pedal set, it was 822.31, and these are all in euros because that's the native currency of these pedals. So obviously you have to consider import taxes and, you know, duties and all that kind of thing on top as well. But 822.31 euro for what we have in front of us, the 3-pedal set, or make that 619.84 for the 2-pedal set, and that also does include the base plate too. Now, if you look at something like the HE Sprint pedals, which I haven't personally tested, they're 577.69 for the 3-pedal set. You know, they're a very popular design. You know, they're generally considered to be kind of like the go-to next step after Fanatic V3s. So I think, again, to comment on those, we really need to test them. But, you know, 577.69, they are quite a bit cheaper. And then for the 2-pedal set, it's 495.04. So whether or not it's worth the extra 120 euro for these over those, I don't know.
We'd have to give them a go.
It's definitely something that people need to consider. But then you also have to consider that the base plate, if you don't have a rig that's compatible just by bolting directly on, is 77.69 euro for the HE genuine ones. So that brings the price pretty close to the same, pretty much. So
they'd have to be bloody good to be, you know,
I think
a clear choice over
and
these. So.
Then we've got the HE Ultimates, which I do have a year's worth of experience with now. They're €1,098.35 for the 3-pedal set. Again, they don't come with a base plate. That's 77.69 on top. The 2-pedal set is 891.74. These again are the prices directly off their website. So different distributors would be different depending on where you are in the world. But look, I mean, I've absolutely loved my HE Ultimates, but they haven't been without their issues. They are very complex in their design. And I've had, particularly with the clutch, which Tom has there.
Yeah, I thought it was worth having a bit of a look at this, at how they get that 2-stage feel.
So I've had a couple of issues with this part in particular here becoming loose over time, and you can add an extra nut to it to you sort of bind the thread and stop that from happening.
Right.
But, you know, I kind of feel like you shouldn't need to add extra parts to a product to make it work as intended. So
But I think what I love about this is the 2-stage feel. You can see how that kind of works.
And I mean, generally when you are just kind of driving and kicking the clutch fast, you don't notice it with most pedals. And I definitely don't really notice it with the Pneumatic V3 pedals, I would say. But with these, you do notice it. Like, it really does have that kind of second kick. And it's particularly noticeable when you're letting off the clutch to launch a car. You really do, it really does do a very, very good job of simulating that kind of friction point where it kind of sits there and then it clunks off.
Yep.
So,
but not everyone needs that.
Not everybody needs that.
Clutch on your steering wheel.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, whether or not it's worth it to you is up to you. But as we said, that the clutch is definitely, as it stands right now, the weakness in these pedals.
I think I've probably used the clutch on my V3s about 10 times. Depressed it 10 times.
So there you go.
So, for me, maybe, that 2-pedal set sound like really good value.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we look at, we'll go down to the Pneumatic V3 pedals. So they're €359.95 for the basic set. The performance kit is another $29.95 on top of that, which is pretty much a no-brainer, I think. It's pretty well established by now that
for sure.
Those make a huge difference, and they're absolutely worth the extra $30. The damper kit, which you do have on your set, I don't think is worth the extra money.
No, I mean, I've had it for 5-6 months. I've been fiddling around with the damper set, and I have it just pretty much as soft as possible.
Yeah.
And it introduces that crunching.
Yeah, and it doesn't really... I found, like, I experimented with it on the throttle as well, to basically try and simulate the same kind of feel that this gives you. But the problem with it on the throttle pedal on that particular pedal set is that it does add a little bit of lift-off delay. So when you lift, and there is a tiny bit here when you just look at it like that, it doesn't come back quite at 100% spring back.
Definitely didn't notice that.
But you don't notice it when you're driving. Whereas with the Pneumatic V3s, even with the damper set to the weaker setting, I did find that when I lifted off the throttle pedal, it didn't come with my foot. There was a bit of a delay, and that did kind of screw me over a couple of times, particularly with F1 cars where you spin up really easily.
The biggest noticeable difference is the pedal plate itself. It's sharp and kind of hurts under your foot if you're not wearing shoes, and if you're wearing shoes, you found that it sort of tore your shoe apart a bit.
Whereas
these just straight away, they just feel so beautiful.
So yeah, I'd say these are definitely an upgrade from the Pneumatic V3s, even if you do have the damper kit and the performance kit on top. They do cost a bit more, but yeah, whether or not it's worth it to you, I think it's really something that you need to try for yourself if you can. Like, it's very hard to convey. And I mean, as you saw in the driving test, like, I really liked the feel of these, even with the spring at the weaker setting. And then after I got used to it with the stronger setting, I enjoyed that too. But, it really is a personal preference thing. And I think that, the amount of adjustment that we have available on these works really well. And it's able to cater to so many different driving types. But I think it's really testament to the product that I was able to match my lap times.
Straight away.
And that was a track and a car combination that I did, hours of practice, because I did it in
laps.
I did hundreds of laps there. So it wasn't like I became more familiar with the track over time or anything. It was literally just the pedals was the only difference. And, going from the HE Ultimates back to something like this, which is, significantly cheaper, I was able to match my times
better
and even better my time, and that was with no adjustment at all. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is.
It is, yeah, exactly.
So I guess in summary, guys, if you're looking at getting these pedals, I mean, we can't find, other than the issues with the clutch, which we believe will be resolved and we'll update you guys later, I don't see any reason not to recommend these. I think they're really good. The only thing that concerned me a little bit really was just that firmware upgrading process. That was a bit clunky.
It was clunky, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I was pretty nervous.
It was a little bit scary, but I'm sure that over time, as the brand develops, they'll come up with,
But no, the software and everything worked. The drivers worked well. They're very easy to use and everything. So
integrated well, gives you all of the adjustments that you need, had no other problems at all. So yeah, guys, hopefully this review's helped you guys out. If you do have any other questions, let us know down in the comments, and let us know what other pedals you'd like us to test out as well. We do have a couple of other hydro pedals in the pipeline to test out too, so that's
they make me nervous.
I know. The more moving parts you add, the more complexity, the more opportunity there is for things to go wrong. And again, that's why something like this can be really cool, because it just does what it does. And it does it well, and it's no more complex than it kind of needs to be.
No, I'm very keen to try these out long term.
Yeah, well, these are going to be Tom's, I think, unless I decide to use them. I think
you might. If you're getting 4/10 a lap faster.
Yeah, I'm gonna try out these new hydro pedals for a while and see what I think. But Tom's going to do some long-term testing with these pedals. He's going to replace his V3s with these for a while. See how he goes with it, and we'll report back if we do come across any issues. But let us know in the comments if you have any other questions. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching. Leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Make sure that you're subbed so you don't miss our future content. and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
See ya.